This is CBN NewsWatch.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch on Friday, September 25th. I'm George Thomas. Today, the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg becomes the first woman to lie in state, capping days of commemorations. The family of Breonna Taylor speaks publicly for the first time after a ruling that has left many devastated. Lockdown in Israel, just days ahead of a major Jewish holiday. Stuff is really getting challenging in that place. And the challenging cancel culture. When is silencing someone too much? Those stories and much more on this edition of Newswatch. But we begin in our nation's capital, where Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the first woman to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol. Following days of commemorations, Ginsburg's casket will be brought to the Capitol Friday morning for a private ceremony. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden and his wife Jill plan to attend. Ginsburg has been laying in repose for 2 days at the Supreme Court, where thousands of people paid their respects, including President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump on Thursday. Trump plans to announce his nomination, by the way, for Supreme Court Justice tomorrow. Ginsburg will be buried next week in Arlington National Cemetery. We are expecting to hear from the family of Breonna Taylor today. This will be their first time speaking publicly since the grand jury decision was announced. The officers were not charged with Breonna's killing. The attorney for Taylor's family is now demanding the release of grand jury's transcript. The attorney general has said that would not be made public, but the governor of Kentucky is calling for the transcript to be released.
They want to know what evidence did Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron present to that grand jury? Did he present any evidence on behalf of Breonna Taylor?
Federal charges are still a possibility as the FBI is conducting its own investigation. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention predicts up to 23,000 Americans could die from COVID-19 over the next 3 weeks. 33 states plus Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico are seeing an increase in cases. President Trump could reject stricter FDA safety standards that slow the release of a vaccine, but the FDA commissioner says they will stick to their standard.
Our thorough review processes and science will guide our decisions. FDA will not permit any pressure from anyone to change that.
6 states and D.C. have announced plans to review vaccine data independently. The COVID-19 pandemic has created a dilemma for Christians: depend on science, creating a vaccine to save humanity from this deadly virus, or trust God for protection. America's colonists faced a similar scenario when smallpox ravaged the New World. Back then, one man of faith made the ultimate sacrifice for science. Paul Strand has his story.
Some believers seem to feel if they follow what the government and scientists recommend for fighting the coronavirus, they may somehow betray their faith. Well, one of America's earliest and most influential Christian leaders would warn them it's foolish to pit faith against science.
Jonathan Edwards is likely best known for his fire and brimstone sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. It was such a frightening look at hell, it sent American colonists by the thousands into the arms of the loving Savior Jesus Christ. With such sermons, the Massachusetts Puritan and his church helped kick off the Great Awakening, a revival that touched every colony in the mid-1700s. Christian historian Jerry Newcomb.
I think it's safe to say that the Great Awakening unified the colonies.
It brought many converts to love the God of liberty and see gaining their liberty from Britain as a righteous cause. So Edwards fomented a spiritual revolution that led to the American Revolution, but he also loved and promoted the scientific revolution of his day, when many of the greatest scientists were also fervent Christians on a holy mission.
A rational God had made a rational world, and it was their job as scientists, who were men of God, to discover the laws that the Creator himself has impressed into his universe.
During this time, colonization had also imported a killer disease to the New World. Smallpox was already wiping out some 400,000 Europeans each year, and Edwards was pushing for a scientific solution before it became too widespread here. When an experimental inoculation came along, Edwards, as a huge supporter of them, volunteered to put his life on the line as the first to be inoculated in his town.
Showing his utter dedication to science and to doing the right thing as he saw it, in service for God's people.
But he had to know he was risking his life because he'd never been in robust health and suffered a constant fatigue after more than 30 years of studying, writing, and preaching 13 hours a day. In fact, he tried turning down his new job heading up Princeton College because he said he was in the decline of his life, his faculties and constitution slipping. So in taking the experimental inoculation, he gambled with his very life and lost.
Not all that healthy at the time, he died from the inoculation, sacrificing his life in the fight against smallpox. Witnesses, though, say he died in good cheer, and his last words were full of faith.
We basically said, trust in God, and ye need not fear.
Edwards died feeling good he'd promoted and trusted in medical science, even if his own weakened body with its immune system shot didn't survive his particular experimental inoculation. What would Edwards likely say to the folks scoffing at scientific advice on how to fight today's coronavirus?
There's certainly an anti-science feeling among some people, and even some who profess to be believers in Jesus, as if they can just defy the common sense principles and then almost in a sense tempt fate.
But others just doubt if the science around COVID-19 is true, worrying it's warped by false premises or political agendas. Family rights advocate Victoria Cobb.
Everyone, no matter what you believe about this virus, has noticed that the science has been constantly changing. Well, certainly with COVID, we know that things have been very politicized, and we don't know how much the science has even been politicized in the middle of this.
But still,
if Jonathan Edwards were around today, I'm sure he would say, look, folks, be smart about these things as far as this virus, which can spread.
Their caution about fighting dirtiness, germs, and infections is likely why so many pilgrims and Puritans survived the months-long journeys across the Atlantic to New England.
They were very strong in sticking to biblical principles of cleanliness and washing.
Edwards today would push those same principles given by God, which makes so much sense in fighting a virus that can spread so easily unless possibly infected hands, surfaces, and objects are constantly cleaned.
I think when it comes to COVID-19, we shouldn't put the Lord our God to the test in terms of doing foolish things without taking the precautions, the common sense precautions that scientists, by and large, are telling us we ought to follow with COVID-19.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Coming up, lockdown restrictions getting even tighter in Israel. Our Middle East correspondent explains how the country is fighting COVID-19 pandemic. But first, a look at today's trending stories.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
Folks, welcome back. You're watching CBN News. The harsh reality of the coronavirus pandemic has forced Israel into a second lockdown, this time with even harsher restrictions. In one 24-hour period, nearly 7,000 cases and 32 deaths were reported. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl joins me now live from Jerusalem to explain what these restrictions mean and the impact it will have on the holidays. Julie, great to have you back on the broadcast. Tell us, what will these restrictions entail and how are they different from the first time, Julie?
Well, I think Israelis, they were in the lockdown. Now they were out of the lockdown. Now they're back in it. So it seems a lot harsher in some ways. I think probably there'll be more enforcement. They do have a little more freedom to move around, about a half a mile from their house, a kilometer from their house, unless they're buying groceries or going to the pharmacy. There's still a lot of confusion. One thing they may restrict more are prayers and protests. So there's a lot. There'll probably be less public transportation and no takeaway from restaurants, because last time when they took the food away from the restaurants, they sat outside and ate it. So that wasn't exactly, it was kind of out of the theme of things. But the restrictions have been a little bit ambiguous. And so anyway, it's just a bit tough. It's also because it's the holiday time here.
Sure, absolutely. Very major holidays coming up. What is the economic impact of shutting things down again?
So they say it'll cost about $10 billion if the restrictions last for 3 weeks. Businesses that survived the first time are not sure they're going to make it this time. And many Israelis are not so happy about this.
Speaking about that, what else can we see and hear about on Jerusalem Dateline? I'm sure you're covering the COVID lockdown.
We are indeed covering the COVID lockdown. Maybe some a little more positive things about that. There's a hospital in Haifa that has an underground bomb shelter parking lot that it's meant to be for war, and they're converting that into a coronavirus ward, which is, I think, is really brilliant, actually, and interesting. We're also going to be talking about Yom Kippur and prayers in the synagogue and not in the synagogue during this COVID crisis. And George, we actually have one of your stories on our show today about changes going on in Iran, which is a positive thing.
Absolutely, Julie. Thank you so much. And you can see more news from the Middle East from Julie and her extraordinary team tonight on the CBN News Channel at 9:30 Eastern. Folks, still ahead, attempts to shut down free speech leading to tragic consequences. Coming up, a look at how social media is giving life to cancel culture.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back to CBN News. Anger and a rabid social media culture are driving an alarming trend. Online mobs condemning people and organizations they think are offensive. As Ephraim Graham reports, it's known as cancel culture, and it can have deadly consequences. Take a look.
From police brutality to pandemic lockdowns, Americans protesting is a common sight coast to coast. But some demonstrations are moving beyond marches and picket signs.
Backlash and calls to boycott fitness giants Equinox and SoulCycle continue tonight as their owner plans a fundraiser for President Trump,
aiming to shut down businesses.
We live at a time now where we have what we call, as you know, cancel culture, man. And if you do something wrong, you're supposed to be out of here.
And silence people.
A Major League Soccer team fired a player after his wife made racist posts. The editor of Bon Appetit resigned because one Halloween 16 years ago, he dressed like this.
I know what socialism looks like. I don't want that for my children.
Cancel culture came for actor Antonio Sabato Jr. after this speech 4 years ago.
Let's go back to 2016. I mean, your life really changed after you spoke at the Republican National Convention.
And it was one of those moments where everything turned around in a matter of 24 hours against me. I had the most hate toward me from people I never even met, and people that I did know, too, in the industry, and I was attacked. But instead of weakening down and giving away to the bullies in Hollywood, I stood up to them.
Sabato headed to Florida to literally build a new start, beginning with his own studio. Grammy-winning recording artist Lecrae also fought his way back. He battled severe depression as Christian fans dropped him after he began speaking out against racism in 2016.
On one end of the spectrum, though I went through so much trauma and turmoil, I had 4 years to process all of the things that I think people are just now kind of experiencing. I'm confident in truth and justice and what God says. So I'm not afraid to speak up for fear of consequences or being canceled, so to speak.
And there are consequences. Recent research finds 84% of Americans feel cancel culture in the United States is a big problem.
When you give up the idea that human beings are made in God's image, then you no longer need to treat people with respect.
And we've seen how it can lead to more pain than a loss of respect.
The UNCW professor accused of racist tweets and who was found dead in his home died from self-inflicted gunshot wounds. We're learning that now.
It led a close friend of Dr. Jeff Myers to kill himself. Professor Mike Adams made the fateful decision a week before a forced retirement from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. For months, he faced social media hatred and petitions from thousands who wanted him fired over comments they felt to be racist. Myers and Adams worked together at Summit Ministries, training young people to be Christian leaders. Did you have conversations with him about the pressures that he was facing?
Toward the end of his life, he had told me when he was essentially pushed out of the university, he said, my career is over. I said, well, your life's not over. He said, but my career is over. And it brought home the reality that it's one thing to oppose what somebody says. It's another thing to say, because I disagree with you, I will use whatever power I can muster to destroy you as a person.
Did you ever have conversations with your friend about the specifics of the things that he did tweet? Because I read some of them, and some of them hurt me. One in particular, or two in particular, I think of, a black man's biggest obstacle to success is not white racism, it's black culture. Black Lives Matter supporters are either racist, emotionally unstable, or suffering from severe intellectual hernia, or all of the above. Did you ever talk about the specifics of what he...
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, some of the things that Mike wrote or tweeted about rattled me and rattled his friends. There were lots of conversations about, Mike, is that too far? Do you understand how people perceive that? And I think it's important to know that if you ever had talked to Mike about that, you would have found a friend. You would have found that he would listen, that he would engage with you, that he would hear your viewpoint, that he wasn't a rude person. He's actually a really nice person, but a person who felt that it was his job to challenge the speech police.
Were you surprised that Dr. Adams took his life?
Given what Dr. Adams had gone through in the last few weeks of his life, I was concerned for him. My wife and I prayed with him. We FaceTimed with him. The depth of despair of a person is almost never apparent until it's too late. And my message to people is, don't wait. Go ahead and talk about it.
Honest conversation and listening could save lives, resurrect relationships, and lead to understanding other points of view. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Coming up, turning their attention to Christ, how a national event hopes to bring Christians together for a day of prayer.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5, Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
As the nations rage,
you can stand with Israel.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
Call 1-800-700-7000 and get to life.
This is our nature as a country.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he have, which color he is, this is what I'm doing.
Support Israel in their time of need. Get to Life, now available on DVD. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
And I wish that other people throughout the world could see this side of Israel.
Tonight begins a long-awaited time of public prayer and worship in the nation's capital. From a Friday evening worship to a noon prayer march on Saturday and an all-day assembly called The Return, all on the National Mall. As Paul Strand reports, this is intended to be a serious day before God, with organizers saying the fate of the nation hangs in the balance.
Prophetic author Jonathan Cahn and Pastor Kevin Jessup have organized The Return. It's presented as a globe-spanning, 12-hour opportunity for God's people to get serious about returning to Him and pulling their nation from a dangerous ledge.
The biblical template concerning judgment is that the nation, so warned, is given a space of time to return or to head for judgment and calamity.
We're in a real Nineveh moment. It's a critical situation in the nation. And much like Jonah went into Nineveh and said, you have 40 days and then it's all over. Listen, we are at that juncture right now in America. We have 40 days and all we know could be over. And so we need God to hear the cries of the righteous remnant.
Pastor Jessup tells CBN this gathering is not intended as a spectator event.
This is not a presentation, a concert, or glorified prayer meeting. This is a sacred, solemn assembly, as per Joel 2, where we come, the church comes, and we bow before holy God in reverent fear.
Joel 2 says, blow the trumpet in Zion, declare a holy fast, call a sacred assembly. And then, let the priests who minister before the Lord weep. Let them say, spare your people, O Lord. And if God's people will do that, He'll so turn things around that Joel says He'll be able to declare, be not afraid, O land, be glad and rejoice. Surely the Lord has done great things. Jessup says it's a moment for believers to repent and, as the book of Revelation states, return to their first love.
This is a critical Kairos moment, and if we miss it, I don't think we'll have another one.
If you can make it in person, Jessup says there's plenty of room, and if not, many ways to join in where you are.
We have nearly 30,000 churches across America that are simulcasting this event. This will be, I'm being told, the largest ever in Christendom broadcast simulcast.
It's going out to 150 nations in 90 languages. Meanwhile, way down at the other end of the mall, at the Lincoln Memorial, the prayer march organized by evangelist Franklin Graham will begin at noon.
We're more divided today than we've ever been. And we see where we are morally, spiritually, politically. We're in trouble.
So they'll pray about that and so much more during the march. And it will end up here in front of the U.S. Capitol. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the National Mall.
You can watch The Return live on CBN News. Tune in tonight, September 25th from 6 to 9 p.m. and Saturday, September 26th from 8 to 9 a.m. Folks, that is it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day and a great weekend ahead. Goodbye and God bless.